So I'm really excited, right, to join you here today. My name is Adole Azu, and as you heard from, our previous speaker, artificial intelligence is accelerating faster, right? Faster than the policy frameworks on the African continent. And we're seeing all of these global models shaping our economics, right? Our economies. And as all of this happens, we're seeing changes in education, we're seeing changes in healthcare, agriculture, our justice systems, and democracy itself, right? And for us on the continent, the biggest risk remains the fact that we could become what you would call a downstream adopter, right? Just absorbing risks without influencing the rules. And so the role that the summer school is really playing is that it's creating an opportunity, for us within the continent, with the talent, with the institutions that we have, to shape AI rules, do it in a way that protects our rights, promotes innovation, and also reflects African values. But only if, right, we actually invest in structured learning, policy experimentation, and cross-sector collaboration. And with that, I want to welcome everyone today because my role today is to kind of help us examine where Africa, and specifically West Africa, actually sits within the rapidly evolving global AI governance landscape. And to do that, right, I want to pause for a minute. This is meant to be interactive, and so it would be great to hear your voice if it's possible. From our hosts, right? Is it possible for the folks here to participate? Are they able to speak or, share thoughts if something is posed to them? Or should I just go on without the interaction? Is this interactive? Okay, so I can't hear anyone. I'm not sure if you're able to interact. Let me look in the chat and see if there's any thoughts expressed or any response to the question I was asking. They can react using the chat. Okay. All right, then we will use the chat to respond to a couple of questions because I'm curious, right? If you think about Africa and AI in 10 years, what is one innovation you hope becomes common in West Africa? What is one risk you hope we have solved? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Like, how are you thinking about AI in Africa 10 years from today? Is there something that's top of mind for you that you want to see, that you would like to see coming out of this AI revolution? And then is there one risk that you want to solve, right? As you continue your journey, either in governance, either in policy. Any thoughts that folks want to share here? What are your own interests, right? How is that influencing your perspective on what AI is going to bring to the table from a policy perspective, from a governance perspective, from even just a real life perspective? Any thoughts, anything coming to mind for you? Okay, so I'm not seeing anything in the chat yet, and I'm hoping that as you think about it, right, any thoughts that come to mind for you, you will share. But today we want to examine where Africa and specifically West Africa actually sits within the rapidly evolving global AI governance landscape. And so through this session, we will get a good understanding of the African Union's emerging AI strategy and extract insights from global governance models such as the EU AI Act, the UNESCO AI ethics framework, and then the UN's evolving, architecture, right? All of these form I guess, the backbone against which West Africa is positioning itself, and Africa in general, positioning itself for leadership within this AI world. Now, from the continental context, right, we want to think about the AU's vision because this is meant to be a capacity accelerator. And our goal, as we think about the entire continent, will be to try and bridge the widening AI governance gap through practical learnings, cross-sector engagement, and really by trying to ground our work in continental frameworks so that by the end of this session or by the end of the entire summer school, each participant feels inspired to contribute to draft our AI governance roadmap for West Africa aligned with the AU's direction. And so we'll start by looking at the AU strategy itself and its relevance, given the fact that African states face significant risks of regulatory fragmentation. Every country is different. Every country has its own, jurisdictional issues. Every country is sovereign, right? And so with that, when each country actually writes its own AI rules in isolation, we end up with systems that are incompatible, and innovators struggle because you can't actually move from maybe Ghana through Togo to Nigeria without having to make some major changes or pivots. And so the AAU strategy, which was, I think, formally adopted in 2024, is not yet fully implemented in all member states. We know that there are many countries that are still drafting national AI strategies or waiting on institutional capacity to actually move themselves forward. But even though the strategy itself is still evolving, its structure reflects 5 main pillars, right? And these pillars focus on harmonizing the governance across the continent, making sure that we have shared infrastructure so that we can communicate and work together, focusing on skills development, capacity building, right? We have to be able to actually function within an AI or digital workspace and global digital AI workspace. We want to have innovation enablement, to ensure that AI is implemented in a rights-based and inclusive way. Think about all the languages we have. Think about the culture, which is so different across multiple countries. The strategy is very ambitious, and it's focused on rights, and it positions Africa as, a space where hopefully we can achieve our Agenda 2063, and also I think some of the goals across our different countries, especially from a development perspective. General feedback that we're getting across the continent is positive, from an inspiration or aspiration perspective. But we have challenges. There's very cautious realism around capacity, infrastructure, financing, coordination, and the risk of, just maybe creating policy without actually planning adequately from a delivery or implementation perspective. This first pillar, right, of the AU document emphasizes the development of unified normative and regulatory frameworks across member states, across national AI strategies. So we're seeing regulatory bodies, risk-based governance, data and algorithmic accountability, oversight, harmonization across the continent being the focus of the first pillar. And with this particular pillar, states are recognizing the need for governance, but many are still at the drafting stage. So we're seeing governance frameworks addressing data protection, cybersecurity, consumer protection, competition, etc. All of these are flagged in the Continental strategy. But of course, there are also concerns that we have all of this ambition around what we want to do, but it's actually outpacing our institutional capacity. And so I saw in one analysis as I was preparing for this lecture that the AU uses ambition to frame future possibilities in environments where basic infrastructure like electricity, connectivity, etc., remain weak. And so harmonization across the region remains weak as well because different countries are taking different approaches. And of course, that risk for fragmentation still exists. But we must commend several countries as well for actually moving forward. Because in Nigeria, for instance, I think a Senate Bill 731 this year seeks to establish a National Artificial Intelligence Commission to govern AI development and deployment. And it really shows a national move towards implementing the governance regulation pillar, right? So I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out, because from a regional or ECOWAS perspective, what actually happens when one ECOWAS country moves faster than its neighbor? Are you thinking about business between the countries? Are you thinking about trade between the countries? How are we going to avoid regulatory divergence, within West Africa? This is something that we need to think about as we go through this country by country adoption or creating of strategies. The second pillar that I want to kind of spend some time on is the skills, education, and capacity building pillar. And this one addresses data governance sovereignty, sharing cross-border flows, building AI-ready infrastructure, compute, data centers, connectivity, and enabling African data ecosystems. What's happening with our local data sets? Who owns them? What about our local languages, right? Do we actually have words in our local languages that represent or reflect all of this amazing work that is happening in the AI world? Like how do you actually explain AI to somebody who doesn't speak English? And with the continent's AI compute capacity accounting for just 1% globally, right? You can imagine where we are from the global perspective. Many countries still lack, in Africa, we lack robust infrastructure. All the things that are necessary, right, to help us actually build the institutional capacity to move forward might not necessarily have been developed properly within our jurisdictional spaces. Think about data sovereignty right now. It's emerging as a very, very key concern. And one news piece actually recently noted that some countries had received like technical support by, to help them develop their AI strategies. And one of the biggest issues people are thinking about is data sovereignty. Where is our data going? What is happening to all of the information that is going from Africa into, AI development? Do we have any control over it? And how does this impact cross-border cooperation? We're still at the very beginning stages from a continent's perspective, even though there are folks here, right, who are actively innovating within AI. In Addis Ababa this year, I think in May, 40, more than 40, I think, African countries convened under the AI for Africa banner, and they were emphasizing investments in data center infrastructure. But the question would be, how long is it going to take for us to actually implement these? If you think about countries, sovereign states lacking data centers or high-end compute power, how can they actually participate meaningfully in a continental, strategy or development from an AI perspective? What models, right, are coming to mind? What are you thinking about? What is coming to mind for you as a professional within that space, as a potential contributor when it comes to data and compute infrastructure? This is something we want to be thinking about. Then there's actually, skills, education, and capacity building. And this covers building an African talent pipeline, in AI, raising AI literacy among policymakers. An amazing job has been done, by this session, for instance, as in the entire summer school, raising AI literacy among policymakers, among regulators, and the public, right? If you think about the folks who are actually regulating how we were creating our laws, if they don't have a solid understanding of what AI is, how it functions, right? How it's impacting us, the risks associated with using AI, the harms or potential harms it could cause, the opportunity for development relying on AI. If they don't have a good understanding of this, but they have the responsibility to develop curricula or support research or encourage women and underrepresented groups in AI, how are they actually going to do this? The data tells us that Africa houses only 3% of the global AI talent pool. And so how are we going to build our talent pool, to ensure that we're explicitly, emphasizing capacity building? In Ghana, for instance, we have a national AI strategy, a draft document, or maybe it's been finalized, I'm not sure, but I know a strategy exists, and it places a lot of emphasis on multi-stakeholder engagement, aligning with the, continental strategy, showing early alignment with the skills and capacity building pillar. And you find a lot of organizations and groups within Ghana, right, trying to help bring our population up to speed. But how do you build AI regulatory capacity in countries where, like I mentioned, basic, literacy is low, right? What capacity building looks like, is different, right, across all of our different countries. And so there's still this opportunity to kind of harmonize and do things together in order not to end up with systems that are so disparate that it's impossible to actually do something together as a union. Then comes innovation, entrepreneurship, and industry support. And this pillars promotes responsible AI innovations. We want to support our small and medium scale enterprises. We want to support research hubs, sandboxes, and invest in African-led AI. Local industry, not only, we don't want to actually only focus on importing foreign solutions. We want to enable our own value chains, aligning with our Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and the digital agenda so that we can enable AI that really has positive economic empowerment outcomes for our people. And there's a growing attention here to local language models, right? African data sets, local use cases in agriculture, in health, education. However, the link between governance frameworks and innovation, support, I think needs more clarity, because how do we ensure that our regulation is enabling, rather than actually stifling local innovation? This is something that continues to show up not only in Africa, but across the globe, right? You've seen this topic being discussed in the US. It's coming up in the EU as well, right? So we have, I think, a global push for ensuring that innovation, entrepreneurship do not suffer, because we want to make sure that we're doing adequate regulating. The other part would be the funding. At the Global AI Summit on Africa, I think in April of 2025, there was a continent-wide push for an Africa AI Fund and then an Africa AI Council. And I think very recently that council has been launched, right, to support innovation ecosystems. And so at least this shows that the innovation pillar is taking shape, and the council specifically will be pivotal in promoting like AI initiatives throughout the continent, right, particularly in governance. So I'm excited to see, how that works. And then, of course, comes inclusion, right? Our rights, human rights, and then the ethics that surround the AI that is being built or that is being deployed across the continent. We want to make sure that cultural diversity, gender equality, human rights, linguistic, diversity, accessibility, for people with disabilities, and also prevention of algorithmic bias and unnecessary surveillance and discrimination don't permeate the AI that we use, the AI that we're leveraging, the AI that we're bringing into our space. So we want to think about our local value system. Now, the rights and inclusion dimension is receiving strong support from civil society and academia, and many highlights that African governance cannot simply replicate Western models. And so we know that. But the question will be, where is the institutional oversight, right? Do we have dedicated AI safety institutes? Do we have data on local impacts of AI? When an AI model is built outside Africa but deployed in Africa, how do we ensure that it respects African values? There's a gap there, How do we ensure that it can be used by people who don't speak non-African languages, by people who only speak African languages, by people who only live within African contexts? What governance processes do we actually need to be able to embed inclusion into our AI development and deployment? And so the AU strategy is really critical for us. And because we are on a journey and we're trying to prepare ourselves to actually take responsibility for the policy and governance of AI on our continent, we have to ask ourselves some questions, right? Because we have all of these documents that are being published across the continent. Some of them are being called strategies, some are called policies. And currently, I think we have more than 12 national AI strategies and about 3 national AI policies on the continent. Now, the strategies typically aim to establish maybe direction and answer the how, by providing a roadmap to harness AI for socioeconomic gain. But when you talk about a policy, that is something that is established. It's establishing a more specific guideline, framework, principles for technological development. So policies are, I guess, firmer, right, than the strategies, and that just provides some guidance. However, you're beginning to realize that this distinction is not always clear. As the analysis of Africa's national AI strategies and policies, you will see some comparable approaches across policy and strategy, with both types of documents providing vision and guidance on how to effectively harness AI. And so I just want you to look at these statements here and take a position, right, in your own mind. And then with that, explain to yourself why you're taking that position, because this is where policy development, this is where strategy development actually comes, to mind, actually becomes clearer. Should Africa adopt a unified continental AI law? What do you think? How would that work? Why do you think yes? Why do you think no? What are the benefits if we had a unified continental AI law? What about AI in elections? How should we manage that, right? Should we be strict about it? Should we make sure that there's no AI involvement at all in our elections? Are people going to start censoring? We don't know, right? Should AI be deployed in national security, or should we wait until governance structures mature? These are questions that if you put yourself in the policy space, you have to be thinking about, making those decisions and determining why you're taking those positions. Because when you have a strategy or you have a policy, right, then you have to actually implement it and follow it. We have the AU strategy, and it's not just a document for us, right? It's a blueprint for sovereignty, digital competitiveness, and it provides a continental reference point. And the whole idea is to make sure that we're protecting our African values and allowing the region to speak with one voice if, we find ourselves, let's say, in global negotiations, for instance. And so this brings us back to the same question again. What is our continental position about an AI model that is built outside Africa but deployed in Africa? What do we think about this? How should this stand? Beyond the AU, we are operating within an ecosystem, and the global governance ecosystem is moving very fast. And so I want to share briefly about what's happening on the continent in the global arena, so that we can kind of compare that to where we are and then figure out what we want to do, what we don't want to do. Now, the EU AI Act is probably being considered the world's most comprehensive and binding regulation right now. It entered into force in 2024. It's the world's first comprehensive binding AI law. And it uses a risk-based model. There are things that are prohibited, right? You can't do AI scoring with manipulative systems. There are some biometric categories that are not actually allowed within the EU AI Act. There are things that are kind of, categorized as high risk, AI used in hiring, injustice, education, migration control, and so on and so forth. And really, it creates some new obligations for transparency, which is really critical when you're introducing something new law, new approaches, new ways of doing things. It seeks to mitigate risk, right? And also lays, I think, a very heavy emphasis on model documentation. And things that are categorized as low risk within the EU AI Act are largely unregulated, but they still have, transparency requirements. Now, the EU exports regulation, right? And so it actually is having extraterritorial impact. If you're a company or government that's interacting with the EU market, you will feel the impact of these requirements. If you think about Africa, we lack a continent-wide risk classification system. We don't have a risk classification system. We don't have an AI or algorithmic registry. And that's one of the things that the institute that I lead is trying to come up with. We want to put out this challenge to help build Africa's first AI tools registry and risk based governance framework because we don't have a classification system. We don't know what has been developed or deployed across the continent from a continent-wide perspective. Many African countries, for instance, rely heavily on biometric systems that would be high risk in the EU model. People might be developing things like that within our spaces that we're not conscious of, and they're being used. And so what is high risk in Europe might be maybe necessary infrastructure in West Africa. But we need to build that early compliance capacity for African countries, African companies that are exporting, first of all, digital services to Europe, and also kind of use the EU standards as a reference, not a blueprint, but a reference to help us also develop our own, framework. Then there's the United Nations, processes. And here we have UNESCO's ethics recommendation. It's been adopted widely across Africa, and it offers an actionable ethics blueprint. It focuses on human rights, inclusiveness, non-discrimination, environmental sustainability, several of the principles and pillars that are relevant and important within our AU strategy. So this is really the closest the world has to a global ethical baseline. And Africa had strong representation, right, when it came to shaping this. And so we're following this very closely. You'll realize that the AU strategy mirrors UNESCO values very closely. We're hoping that as we continue to develop our own strategy, we will, use the UNESCO model as an ethical backbone for our national frameworks. Make sure that we're building ethics oversight units within ministries that impact regulators, that, kind of audit or engage with our universities, and really integrate ethics by design into public sector AI procurement. UNESCO really is giving Africa a shared language, right? Shared language and values, and we can leverage this when negotiating outside of our space. And then there are the United Nations processes, which are moving towards global safety baselines and oversight. The UN, is deeply involved in AI governance, and there's so many different channels through which this is happening. Now, these forums influence global norms, how resource is, I guess, flowing across the globe, capacity building, and international expectations. Africa participates in the UN, but we have very limited negotiating leverage there. And so really, I think we're sending very limited, maybe AI specialized representation. And here in that space, we're risking being a policy taker unless the AU actually forms a strong unified position. And so for us, leveraging the AU strategy as a basis for Pan-African negotiation is critical. But we have to think about maybe a West African AI governance coalition to engage UN processes more strategically, advocate for African priorities, language inclusion, the data sovereignty, compute access, infrastructure justice, and push for global rules that protect our small market economies to ensure that we are insulated from, exploitative AI deployment. Now, there's so many frameworks out there, right? The GP, AI, right? OECD, G7, G20 efforts. GP is where countries are really experimenting with practical AI governance, before binding law exists. It's bringing governments, industry, right? And when I say GP, I mean the Global Partnership on AI, right? The multi-country initiative that was launched in 2020. And there's also the G7. It's shaping the rules for powerful frontier AI models. And the G20 connects AI with economic transformation, digital public infrastructure. And together, these groups show that global AI governance is not one thing. It's really a patchwork at this point. But for West Africa, the lesson is clear. We want to engage. That's it. There will always be multiple, channels, multiple fora. We want to engage. We want to engage early. We want to adapt, not just adopt, but adapt what works and insist on African relevance and global standards. We want to make sure that, African responsible AI principles, safety testing, data governance, and transparency, all of these elements that are coming up with the GPAI are actually also showing up in our governance frameworks before we end up in a position where binding laws exist. And so the value of multi-stakeholder coalitions is really demonstrated through these additional efforts. And it's something ECOWAS countries can actually emulate, right? To build shared infrastructure, shared standards, and shared bargaining power. This is what we want to do, right? Making sure that we are creating that opportunity to localize, but doing it together with the rest of the continent, and perhaps starting from a sub-region like ECOWAS perspective. And then that way, we get the opportunity to actually be conscious about how we're tying AI governance to our economic competitiveness and not only treating it as, let's say, a risk or safety issue. Now, what are the implications for Africa when you look at now the global context that we've looked at, and then our AU situation and what's happening across ECOWAS? Africa really just wants to avoid becoming a rule taker, like simply adopting external frameworks. And so as we close this session, I want to leave you with a simple but powerful reminder that Africa is not arriving late to the AI era. What is critical is that Africa is arriving with some clarity, with values, with a continental strategy that places people, rights, and development at its core. We have explored how, the African Union's AI strategy provides a bold continental anchor, a roadmap to align our institutions, our infrastructure, our innovation, our ecosystems, and our moral compass. We've seen how global efforts in the EU, UNESCO's ethics frameworks, the G7 frontier model are shaping the international system. But the central lesson today is that Africa does not need to copy the world. Africa needs to interpret the world and shape AI in ways that reflect our realities, our cultures, our risks, and our aspirations. And across the 5 pillars of the AU strategy, we see the same message echoed. Governance must be contextual. Infrastructure must be shared and inclusive. Skills must be developed at scale. Innovation must be local and sustainable, and rights must be protected with intention, not by accident. If we apply these pillars thoughtfully, West Africa can do more than adopt AI. We can actually steer its direction. So we move, and so as we actually move right into the next part of our program, I want you to hold on to one question. What role will I play in shaping a West African AI future, right? A West African AI future that is safe, that is inclusive, that is aligned with who we are. Because AI governance is not just about policies and laws. It's about leadership. It's about imagination. It's about building the digital world our children will inherit, right? And so with that, I want to pause and find out and go back to my chat and see if there are any questions or any comments that folks want to share. But I've seen responses to the question I asked, examples of what people are thinking when they think about AI in Africa within 10 years. And some person has mentioned that data models will be localized, a cloud-first approach. Somebody has said that, I hope AI enhances public service delivery, that AI will provide context-specific solutions to improve social, economic, and political problems, that ethical risk, deepening discriminations, and violating human rights are addressed, right? So we are seeing that people on our continent are conscious, right, of what is happening from an AI governance perspective. And we want your curiosity, we want your insight, we want your commitment. We want to make sure that, you feel that you are part of the AI journey, right? Trying to create the AI development, AI deployment landscape that will meet the needs of Africans. I'm going to stop sharing at this point and then come back to the folks here so that we can spend a little bit more time in the chat, to talk about what's jumping at you, any thoughts you have, any comments you want to share. Okay, so I see here PK is saying his open AI enhances public service delivery. I'm seeing, yes. Thank you, Louisa, for posting here that folks can actually unmute to share their comments. And so if you have any thoughts, if there's anything you want to share, please, come off mute, share. If you have questions, go ahead, ask. You can either post them in the chat or you can actually, state the question. And yes, Doji. I see Doji Koku Hato's hand raised. Doji, you can come off mute and
Yes,
say.
yes. Hi.
Hi.
Now, thank you for the presentation. Yeah, I'm looking at a future where we could have the cloud first philosophy approach to our AI matters in Africa. Because if we want to go the trajectory of every country or region having a data center,
Mm-hmm.
that would be headache. We don't even have the funding already. So I'm imagining a future would rather look at the issue of cloud first instead of individual regions and countries having data centers.
So this is an interesting question, and I think it has been the subject matter of a very open debate that I have had with an executive, I think either a Google executive on LinkedIn, this thing about cloud first. And the idea that we can build, let's say, our AI capability on the cloud, yes, that will be fast, right? That accelerates our development because the cloud already exists and the services are there, the infrastructure is created. But think about national security. Can you build your critical military, let's say, applications on somebody else's cloud, or should you, from a policy and safety and risk development perspective? Think about, let's say, the Russia-Ukraine war. What if Ukraine had built on Russian provided cloud services? Where would they be right now? And so there's this growing conversation around maybe hybrid systems. Yes, every country cannot develop its own, but that's where the shared or continent-wide option becomes quite attractive. Instead of building on an external that is outside of the continent, how about the continent establishing one big data center that is, utilized across our multiple jurisdictions? If we're not comfortable enough actually across the continent sharing a data center and having our information mingling on the continent, how are we comfortable actually having it sitting somewhere else? And so, Doji, I want you to think about this. How is this, what is this triggering for you? What are your thoughts here? I saw somebody else raise their hand and then your hand is still up. So I'm wondering if that, yes.
Okay, thank you very, very much for this informative section. It's just great. Thank you. So I have two questions. My first question is, I think from yesterday's session, they were very, very emphatic about the fact that we don't really need a legislation now for AI, but we should continue to have strategies and policies guiding its development. But my question is, with the journey to responsible AI, are these strategies and policies strong enough to guarantee all these ethical practices in its development? And my second question is, we are here in Accra talking about AI, AI development, responsible AI. But there are still people in my holy village, even battling with connectivity. What practical strategies can we put in place to really close the new AI divide that is because it's definitely going to exacerbate the already existing digital divide we have. So how do we bring all of them together? Like, I just don't understand it. How can we do it? Yeah.
You asked two questions, but I think I will start with the second question. And really, the second question is an infrastructure question, and
Yeah.
it's partly a design question. Let me tell you why it's partly a design question and how, with intentionality, we can actually overcome it. You know, the way you can access, let's say, apps on your laptop, but also on your mobile device. And sometimes you're like, when I try to do this on my mobile phone, everything gets messy, right? It's like it doesn't look the same. I'm not able to actually navigate what's happening on my mobile device, even though when I get on my laptop, I'm able to function effectively. Because whatever app you're accessing and the way it functions on the laptop or the computer, the desktop, it needs to be redesigned to be mobile friendly, right? To work effectively in mobile, show up in a certain way on a mobile device so that you can, manipulate it to get the outcomes you're looking for. So it's a two-part, there's a decision-making element here for us as African countries. We have the resources, and we know we have the resource. I am not in the group of folks who believe we don't have the resources. And so anytime you interact with me, I am coming from the point of view that we have the resources, but it's our priorities and how we use the resources that gets in the way of perhaps getting the outcomes we're looking for. So that's my premise. So starting from the premise of we do have the resources, the question would be, do we actually want to build the basic infrastructure so that we can engage with the world on the same, playing field? Like, do we want to level it out for our people? Do we want to make sure that instead of, let's say, maybe our money being used to build something or buy a house for somebody, right? Misappropriation, that we will use it to expand maybe infrastructure as access, provide electricity, make sure that basic education is actually effective. Are we going to use our money that way? That is a priority or policy decision followed by an implementation process. And so if we want to function within the AI world, do we want to invest in actually creating the right environment to make that happen? Okay. If we don't want to create the right environment to make that happen, then now we have a lobbying problem, because you're in a space where, let's say, connectivity is not guaranteed. Broadband does not really exist for everyone all the time. It's expensive. Data is expensive. So the question would be, how are we investing in creating maybe offline scenarios, right? How are we investing our time from a research and development perspective in creating approaches that make it possible for a non-smartphone, I don't know, right, to maybe access the internet? We have to take ownership. First of all, we have to take ownership for something and decide that this is our approach. This is how we're going. And then we're going to put the time into implementing what we want to do, right? So I hope I have, scratched the surface for you when it comes to the digital divide. It does exist, but remember that if you were creating something, you would be creating it for your benefit. So somebody else has also invested and they've created it for their benefit. It meets their needs to a certain extent. It does cause harm. There are risks associated. They are the creator who is also in business, right? AI is not only for good. AI is also for economic value. There's competitiveness there. There's an opportunity for exploiting, right, and enriching somebody who has invested there. And so we have to walk this balance eyes wide open and understand the dynamics within which we are looking at things, right? Once you take personal accountability, it changes a lot of things. And so let's keep having this conversation. But this is where I'm going with it. We have the resources. We need to make up our minds and we need to sit up, right? And actually either create the right environment or get involved in developing something that works for the situation that we have chosen, right, to put ourselves into. I see Oseni Yusuf. You can come off mute and share, Mr. Salami. I see your hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the highly impactful presentation you just made now. And I think I commend your effort. Thanks so much. So I think for me, I'll be coming. My question is this: I'll be asking two questions. First question is, how do we strengthen political will of African states towards adaptation, and execution of some of these laudable policies? Because speaking from experience, I know a lot of African countries has AI policy, specifically from Nigeria, from Ministry of Economy, from Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy. We have a very strong policy. But the funny part of it is there's one thing to have it, and it's another thing to implement it. You're speaking about ECOWAS, EU, and other. All those African organizational settings, some of them don't even have an harmonized voice towards making sure that they really strengthen up whatever policy they are putting on board for individual countries. That's why you see Ghana is having their own, Nigeria is having their own, Kenya having, Uganda having, Tanzania having. All this will cause disarray. So how do we strengthen political will of our leaders in Africa towards making sure that everything is synced?
Okay. So I think you've asked a very important question, right? And I hope you can see my screen. I don't know if you can see what should a West Africa AI governance roadmap look like, if you can see that. Okay. And political will is actually the will of the people, right? Okay. And a lesson that I have learned throughout my career or my professional journey, and also in my personal life, actually, is that accountability makes a great difference in terms of what you get from an output perspective. We have an inertia problem as people in general. I can't speak for all of Africa, but I can speak for parts of West Africa because that's where I come from. We don't hold people accountable, right? We are not clear on what our expectations are. Sometimes we don't even have expectations. And so you have to start from identifying a goal in order to actually get to the outcome. What should a West Africa AI governance roadmap prioritize? What are we looking for? Because you can't do everything at the same time. It's expensive, it costs money, right? And without focusing, you're not going to be able to deliver anything meaningful, right? If you start with 500 different projects at one point. Which AU pillars are most urgent for your country? Is it country-wide? Is it AU-wide? Is it ECOWAS-wide, right? Which risks are most contextually relevant for us? How can West African countries collaborate rather than working in silos? What capacity gaps must be urgently addressed? These are things we have to think about, right, and address before we can actually get to the outcomes you're looking for. Like, once you ask yourself the questions, then you come up with your own priority recommendations that these are my priorities. This is my next step based on collaboration. We are all in agreement. This is my one capacity building need. My focus is on X. And then we get to our opportunity, right? We've missed several technological waves, but AI provides this opportunity for us to actually do things and do it differently. We can shape the kinds of technologies that will serve the continent's future, that will reflect our values and uphold our rights. But we as people need to hold our politicians accountable. We need to hold them accountable. It's not going to happen by accident. We need to hold them accountable. It's accountability. It's accountability. If they don't deliver, what questions do we ask? What are the implications for them, right? Nothing. For most African states, accountability. That's it. Clarity and accountability. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? Yes, Doji, I see your hand up again.
Thanks. It's just a follow up to what I said.
Mhm.
My idea of cloud first is not to allow the big techs to monopolize it, but we doing it ourselves because, as you said, we have infrastructure problems. And I could imagine Africa coming together with their resources and say they're building data center in there. It will be difficult. But the cloud first becomes an option for us, or what they call the data embassy, which could also help, solve, because for us to build our own AI, that means that we also need to have a data that is African in nature. And so we need to start from somewhere. Two, about the political role, I agree with you perfectly. How many African countries really, even in their budget, really talk about we are dedicating this amount of money for AI, because it's like everybody is talking about AI, but nobody is really ready to invest in it. So that much I agree with you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yes, so I think I absolutely understand the expediency, right? The speed of movement that can be achieved by building on, the cloud or focusing on like the data embassy concept. But the question I want to ask is going to take us back. If I don't think it's about actually creating our own AI per se. AI has already been created, it exists, right? And so no matter what happens, we have the opportunity to build on, to develop, to improve, to adapt, right? To customize solutions that work for the continent, create those guardrails, the frameworks that make sure that it's not causing harm, risk is mitigated, across all of our spaces. But the question I want to ask goes to the root, right, of the African mentality. If you don't want to actually invest in creating something, you don't want to put the money there, what is it that makes you think that if somebody else invests in creating it, they will be thinking about you or should be thinking about you when it's not that you don't have the money? Remember that African presidents would actually buy a jet or, spare an exorbitant amount of money, get into an aircraft, right, at a cost that you would perhaps not find the British PM doing, to go to the UK to look for funding. This is the question I'm asking. It's a question that goes back to our own mentality. We don't want to pay for education, for instance, right? If there's a certification workshop and it's going to charge a fee, right? We're reluctant to invest, but we invest in Louis Vuitton handbags and Polo Ralph Lauren fragrances and perfume. The question is, who should do that for you? That's why I say it's not a lack of resources. It's a lack of will, right? And a mindset. And if we want to accelerate our own development, we need to go back down that path. Prioritize. Prioritize, yes. Prioritize. Sami, Lai.
Me?
Yes, I
I
can
don't know
hear
whether
you.
you hear me now.
Mhm.
Brilliant. First of all, Ayuko Obomondenwa. I would like to start off by putting this across. If at the end of this summer school, we as a group can advise, if not any organization, the AU, just as they come up with a governance structure that they set out for us, to look at certain thematic areas. And I'll start with trade. Successfully, we've been able to launch the AFTA in Ghana and Africa as a whole. If we can, like you earlier alluded, and have the willpower, first of all, set up a group that will sit above the politicians. These are country specific, where we have representations that even if there's a change in government A in country A, it wouldn't affect the master plan. Two, Ghana in particular, I can say that we have 5 independent main lines coming into the country. And we have a good advantage of being the center of the world. If we can collectively suggest to this group that we've set up to have the will to set up at least one thematic data center purposely for trade. so that data on trade and stuff like that would be stored in here. Later on, we can look at replicating in other sub-regions so that at least when it comes to our trade data, we will own it. We can move from trade into other sectors like education, like maybe areas like agri-tech, so that at the end of the day, we may not have the resources to do all at a go. But then thematically, we will create that particular, I'll say, framework. Then gradually, I'm a data center engineer, and I know the value of having replication, so that at least there will be no single point of attack. If we are able to start off in this way, I'm of the view that the objective we set up for this summer school will go a long way in suggesting to the powers that be that, listen, our priorities must be re-looked at and focused so that at least we don't lose on this wave also. Because yesterday at the end of our session, it was clear that we are heavily using the AI.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the biases are against us. And it's about time that we as a people wake up and create our own. Yesterday, I was sad to hear that we don't have what it takes to even have funding in our own. My brothers have to set up their company offshore to come and supply services inshore, which for me is a non-starter. And whoever pays the piper calls the
Got
tunes.
the tune, yes.
So it's something I would like us to really address in our reports when it's all said and done, that we should set something that will be above the politicians, because trust me, they cannot be trusted. They will take the money and disappear after some time.
But why
They
do
will
we
go
let
to do.
them? Why do we let them take the money and disappear? Why is it that we are seeing this need to be conscious about the biases? We can see the biases the same way that we can see, let's say, inaction on the part of our politicians. I do a lot of analogies, right? So if you give me an example, I will try and frame something, right? An existing question in that same vein to see how we can actually move forward. If we believe that there is a need to do something to mitigate the biases that we're seeing, for instance, in AI, and believe you me, I see it. I think last week or so, I posted on LinkedIn that my dad turned 90 and my sister was creating this poster around world events that occurred in 1935. And so I went to ChatGPT and I asked that question, like, what are some notable Africans? Who are some notable Africans who were born in 1935? And it gave me this long list, right? I think I said 10. I like to limit things. It gave me 10 people. And it gave, when they were born, month, day, year, and so on and so forth. But I know the human in the loop is critical, right? And so I decided to do my checks. Now, fortunately, I knew to check at once because Jerry John Rawlings showed up. Jerry John Rawlings was not born in 1935, right? It was an amazing Amataidu, a list of really remarkable Africans, but they were not born in 1935. And so I said to ChatGPT, these people were not born in 1935. I know Jerry John Rawlings was born this year. I know Amataidu was born this year. And then it apologized and said, I'm sorry, let me go and search again. It searched again. It came back with another list of 10 or 15. That was wrong too, right? In the meantime, we had done a prior search for world events that occurred in 1935. And we got an accurate output from that. The moment we changed, the parameters and put it into the African context, everything was a mess, right? It couldn't help us. I went on 3, 4, 5 iterations before I got something meaningful. Who is going to fix that for us? How is that somebody who is going to you must be even aware that it's wrong to then now query ChatGPT. And when it comes to capacity building, I had this conversation with someone and they told me they didn't know that they could actually go back to the AI tool and say to it, I need you to, this is wrong and you need to fix it because it can do a better search. It came back to me and said, let me think longer and harder so that I can give you, accurate data. I hallucinated. And so I see two comments here that I want to mention here. Somebody says the power class manipulates us all because we don't take accountability. Yes, accountability is a problem. We need to build our accountability backbone. It's going to take a while, but we can do it. And what are the available tech support systems for local innovators? Can this summer school policy create network or platform WhatsApp to keep facilitating AI dialogue? I think it can happen very easily. I took a course with the uh, Global Center for AI Governance, right, on AI ethics. And when we were done, they created a LinkedIn subgroup, and then they put all of us in there. It's an interesting space because you're engaging with people who have, some common interests, some information that everyone is interested in sharing, and we, exchange ideas within that space. And so this suggestion to have like a network or a platform to keep facilitating the AI dialogue is an excellent one. And I'm sure, the hub will take it up. And I'm also happy to support making it happen because I would like the conversation to keep going on, right? We are available in multiple forums. I'll find each other on LinkedIn. The ones I can see here, I will find you on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn as well, right? I'm Adole Azu on LinkedIn. Find me, let's connect. Let's keep the conversation alive. Let's spend time actually investing in creating the AI world, right, on the continent that we're looking for. But we need to be conscious and intentional about it. Nobody else is going to do it for us. We have to sit up, right, and make this happen. Deborah has posted that I think it's also helpful if we as a people use our own AI web platforms. So we invest these same trainings we are doing on our own platforms. There has to be a deliberate push to also use our own platforms. How many people know about I don't know I'm not sure what it is, so I'm not going to mention it, but there's no specific support for our own platforms. Most of these foreign platforms are pushed by the countries as well. Our continent, Smally AI, our continent must take interest in pushing our own. The thing is that there's an economic element there. If you want to make some money, right? In Africa, we talk about money and we don't even want to mention numbers. If you want to make some money, then you have to be involved in economic activity or activity that generates some money, right? Okay. Somebody has created something and they are selling it for money. You expect that person to tell you that you should not use what they have created, but you should create your own. I don't know why they should do that from a business mind perspective. It is up to you to realize what your needs are. And if what they've created is not meeting your needs and you need to improve it, build upon it, or do something different, you do it. But that decision is yours, right? That decision is yours. It's competition. It's a capitalist world. There are economic benefits to investing in and creating something. And when you make the investment, you want to reap the benefits. So the question would be, when we are creating our policies and our governance frameworks, are we keeping in the back of our minds, right, that desire to also benefit economically from it? What are we exporting from a tech perspective? And believe you me, it's not for want of capability, expertise, brain power, right? Those are not our issues. So I see another comment by OI. We also have Yarn GPT AI, a multi-serial AI language model. And then Evans has posted that we must remember that trust is not built by algorithms. It is earned through relationships and empathy, and this cannot be programmed. Okay. Any other thoughts, any other questions that folks want to share? This has been a really interesting, engagement, and like one of you said, we should keep the conversation going. Any other questions, any other thoughts, anything else that is coming to mind, for folks here? The one thing that I talk about is language. When was the last time that in Tree, what would you call AI? Or in Ghana? You forget large language models and all of that. Just the AI, the concepts. How would you explain it to somebody in the local language? Anything coming to mind? And so if the thing does not exist in your local language and you are not taking the time, remember that artificial intelligence is a term that somebody created, right? Okay. Now, we didn't create the term, but it has been created. I'm sure, and after it was created, we are using it, but we have not invested in actually deciding how to create the concept within our local languages. And so if you were to speak to your grandma about it, right? Because old people are using AI. And she said, explain it to me. I had a conversation with a group of professionals about AI. And when we started talking about language, right? The fact that we haven't created the language, one of them said, now in thinking about it, it's looking like AI is a spirit, right? Because no matter how he tried to play with it in his head, he couldn't come up with a way of explaining it to somebody without it sounding spiritual. Samilai.
You've got me thinking.
Yes.
No, you got me thinking. I just realized that I don't even know how to call machine in Ghana.
Machine in Ghana is choni, that I know.
Yeah, so I've gone blank on it because my Ghana is very good. I call myself a Ghana literate, but we'll see. It's a very good point you've raised, and it's worth thinking through because my first process of thinking is through Ghana first before English, because I was trained to speak Ghana before I learned the English. But over time, I've lost it. But this is a very big point you've raised regarding our language. So at least we can explain it to people in a dialect they understand. And
Yeah.
I wish Mr. Moore is here. He has built a language model in AI. And now that you've mentioned it, I'll take it up with him. And we'll see how we can work on that. But
Yeah.
very good point you've raised now.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, we don't have common language. We haven't created new diction in our local languages to capture what has been happening, right, in the digital revolution. We have adopted over the years, but we have not invested in making sure that, we are keeping up with it. And so there's an opportunity there. There's a gap there, to help people understand what they are using, what it is, how it works before they adopt it. And then there's an innovation opportunity there as well, because once people understand what they are using or what they are working with, right, there's an opportunity there for them to contribute as well. How do you contribute to something you don't understand? How do you build something better than what exists if you don't understand what you are working with, right? So is the Institute of AI Policy and Governance an open institute? How can we join? That's a good question. You can join and engage with us. What I will do is that I will share some information with, the hub, right, on how folks can connect with the policy with the institute. We have a platform, right, that is called Nectas that you can simply sign onto, and we engage with folks who are interested, in talking to, asking questions with, volunteering with, or doing things with the institutes there. And so I will share that, and it will come to you, with any materials that come from this session, right? Because we would definitely love to engage with you and continue this conversation. Yeah.